We are headed to Pimlico Racecourse and the 149th running of the Preakness Stakes. It's the second jewel of the Triple Crown. Let's take a look.
Trust the Profits is proud to be sponsored by Game of Silks. Go to silks.io to get in the game. Real ownership, real races, real rewards.
Hey everybody, welcome in. My name is Tim. You can find me on the app X, formerly known as Twitter, at the handle @RidersUpTim. Welcome in. I'm going to take a look at the Preakness Stakes coming up, run through the field a little bit, talk about some of the horses that I kind of like on top, and then show you how I plan to approach the race as far as wagering goes. So with that being said, let's jump right in. So here you see it was originally scheduled to be a field of 9 for the $2 million Preakness Stakes. But the big news this week, obviously, was the scratch of Muth, who spiked a fever. This was supposed to be the big story of the Preakness Stakes, and Bob Baffert, who couldn't run in the Kentucky Derby, finally getting to run with his horses. So, you know, originally it wasn't supposed to be Muth. Nisos was the big horse, and that one was out. And now Muth was third or fourth in line, and now that one was out. So we still got a Bob Baffert horse, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I just don't think Baffert is going to be the story that people thought he was in the Preakness Stakes. So with that being said, let's run down the field a little bit. So again, field of 8. I'm going to key on just a handful of horses in here. I have looked at the race, looked at all of the horses, and come up with how I plan to approach it. So let's take a look at that. I am going to go to the number 3, Catching Freedom, as my top pick. This is a horse who, as we know, is coming out of the Derby, was basically the last horse announced to be in the Preakness field. I think it's interesting that the horse comes in here only because I don't think it was originally expected. But from what I saw out of the Brad Cox barn, they said that the horse came out of the Derby incredibly. They gave the horse a few days off, and when he hit the track, he was just full of himself, working really well. Seemed like the Derby did not take anything out of him at all. So they decided to go ahead and point him to the Preakness, and here he is. And from everything that I've seen and heard of his performance at Pimlico since he got there and started prepping for the Preakness, is that he is really looking good on the track. He seems to be having very few ill effects of the Derby, and despite the short rest, I think this is a horse that is going to do well. When I look at the way he finished up in the Kentucky Derby, he was finishing as well as anyone. If you watch that race, he was pretty far back, 15th early in the race, and came with a run, and he was closing as well as Sierra Leone and Forever Young were up front. He was just a little bit further back originally and couldn't get up, but he ended up finishing a good 4th. He was beaten only by a length and 3/4. And he was out finishing Mystic Dan, who is in here and is a horse we'll talk about in a minute. And with a scratch of Muth, is now going to be your morning line favorite. So Catching Freedom is a horse that I have been on for a while. I really like this horse. I liked his performance in the Louisiana Derby. I thought that that was a really good performance. I think the Risen Star has been, if you look at that field top to bottom, has probably been one of the key races of the spring and all the Derby preps. And while Catching Freedom didn't have as good a performance in that one, it led to his performance in the Louisiana Derby. And I'm looking for a similar move here, as he moved forward from the Risen Star to the Louisiana Derby, moving from a 3rd to a 1st. I think he can repeat. I think he can do the exact same thing here. Flavien Prat stays aboard. Prat is 1 for 1 in the Preakness. He's a rider that I think he rides well at Pimlico, and I like everything about Catching Freedom in here. Mystic Dan, obviously your Derby winner. He's the horse going for the second jewel of the Triple Crown. He's the only horse that has an opportunity to possibly win that. With the scratch of Muth, he is now your morning line favorite. The odds I show here are the adjusted odds that I found today, that the adjusted morning line with the scratch of Muth. So he has moved to 8-5 favoritism. And look, I like Mystic Dan. I think the short cutback of a half furlong in here, it favors this horse. We all saw that Sierra Leone and Forever Young were both gaining on Mystic Dan as they got close to the wire, and that was a close photo between the three horses there. So the cutback is going to favor this horse a little bit. We all know that Mystic Dan is another horse that likes a wet track. He's 1 for 1 on a wet track. There is a chance that we get a little bit of moisture in the track as some rain is in the forecast for Pimlico moving forward this week. So that's a possibility. But let's be honest. The ride that BJ Hernandez gave this horse was amazing. The boot scooting boogie he did coming up the rail, and I say that because Brian said he scraped his boot on the rail coming inside as he made that move and got a little bit of daylight there. And he really bullied his way into that position. There wasn't even enough room for him to really get through cleanly, and he found a way through anyway. He saved ground all the way around, had the shortest trip around the track of any horse. And for that reason, it's clear he won, but I'm not sure he gets the same trip in here. And I'm not sure he needs it. Obviously, this is a shorter field. We get that. But dropping down from 18-1 as he was to 8-5, I get the favoritism. I understand it, but I'm just going to try to beat this horse. I can't accept 8-5 in this race after what he was in the last race. So we're going to try to beat him here. Another horse I'm going to play underneath of my top pick, Catching Freedom, is the 8 Tuscan Gold. This is the lightest racehorse in the field. This will be his 4th race. Chad Brown bringing this horse in, putting Tyler Gaffalione up. This is a move we've seen before. The horse is fresh. Chad does well with placing his horses into the Preakness. It seems to me this horse has been pointed to the Preakness all along. Chad had some good horses in the Derby, and you would think that he could have potentially brought some of them over to this race, but he chooses to put this one here. And we all know what he did with Blazing Sevens last year. That was a great second place finish to National Treasure in that race. So this is a horse that must be respected. But again, the adjusted odds down to 9-2 with the lightly raced horse, despite what the horse did there. He's had increasing speed figures in each of his 3 races, and another move forward like that puts him right there. But, you know, in that Louisiana Derby, who was 3rd to Catching Freedom, and I look for him to trail Catching Freedom again. I really like that horse in this position. So I think Tuscan Gold's a must play. It looks to be very chalky, but if this is what we got and this is the way the horses are going to play out, then that's the way I'm going to play it. As far as a couple of horses I like to potentially get into the trifecta, the 7 Just Steel is another horse, the 3rd and last horse of the 3 coming out of the Kentucky Derby. As we all know, this is a horse for Dwayne Lucas, who has 2 here in the field, with also having Seize the Gray, who was the Pat Day Mile winner on Kentucky Derby Day. But Just Steel is another horse who is interesting, and you look at some of his races, and he's been right there with Muth, finishing a solid 2nd in the Arkansas Derby. Didn't get the best of trips in the Derby. There are plenty of excuses that you could say as to why he ended up finishing a badly beaten 17th. But Dwayne Lucas decides to drop Keith Asmussen on the ride, and he's putting Joel Rosario back up, who has ridden the horse before, rode to the win in the Ed Brown at Churchill back in November of last year. But this is a horse that, while I think his past shows that he could be there, the coach seems to find a way to make his way into the Triple Crown races at times. This is a horse I played underneath in the Derby. I thought could potentially get there as well. I just really think that he's just a little bit below the top three that I have here. So he's an underneath play for me at best. The one thing I will say is I think with Lucas putting Seize the Gray in here as well, that Pat Day mile was great because I think that's the distance for this horse. I think he's a miler. I think he's a one-turn horse. Being in this two-turn race, I think he's in here to put some pressure on the front end and give Just Steel an opportunity. And I think that opportunity will be there. The last horse I'm going to discuss and put into my plays here is Imagination. This is the other Bob Baffert, who is now a horse, who is now the only Bob Baffert horse. And again, I'd be remiss if I didn't touch a little bit on the Baffert situation. And I can't say I'm disappointed that none of Bob Baffert's other horses made it here. That was the big story that everyone wanted to make out as to he couldn't get into the Derby. So just watch out in the Preakness and all the horses he's going to bring. And I'm just looking down the list, and it is a who's who of horses that are on the sidelines. So think of that what you will, say of that what you will. I'll reserve comment on that. But when you look at Imagination, this is a horse who ran a really good second in the Santa Anita Derby. The horse in 6 races has been no worse than second, but I do think that this horse is going to want to go to the speed, out to the lead. He is the speed of the race. The 9 position now moves into the 8 hole with the scratch of Muth. I don't think that's too far outside, but he is going to have to get past everybody. And as I just said a moment ago, I think Seize the Gray is going to also want to go out a little bit and potentially provide some early speed. I think you have a couple of other horses that may want to go out and at least get some position. So he's going to have to put in a little bit of work early on, I think, to get out there on the lead. I think he will be on the lead. You look at all of his lines, he doesn't like to pass horses, so he's going to need the lead. I think he has to go gate to wire. And while there isn't tons of speed in here, I think there is enough underneath pressure. Tuscan Go just to his inside, I think is going to want to go find a position, and he's not going to want to be far back. So I look for Tyler to take that horse out, and Frankie's going to have to work Imagination a little bit here to get a good trip, I believe. So I think he can get up front. He's going to run, but I just think that we've got some closers and some stalkers here who are going to pass him by. Again, a good horse. I don't think you can leave him completely off your verticals, and that's why I'm going to play him underneath. But I just think that these other horses are a little bit above him. Plus, I'm really a play against person when a lot of these horses come from the West Coast to the East Coast without having any races out East. This horse has done great on the West Coast, but I need to see something out East here on the East Coast before I put him up top. So those are the horses and that I'm looking at. Here's the way I plan to attack the race is that I am going to play exactas and tries. That's the only thing I'm going to play. My exacta play is going to be a straight up. I am not boxing. If you know me and how I play, I'm either right or I'm wrong in the race. I'm a bettor of conviction. I bet my bets strongly with conviction. I don't mess around with playing a lot of overs and unders and moving them around and boxing them. I just don't see things that way. That's not the way I play the game. So I'm going to play the 3 over the 5 and the 8. That'll cost you $2 for every dollar you want to wager. And then in my trifectas, I'm going to play the 3 over the 5, 8 with the 5, 7, 8, and 9 for third place. That'll cost you $6 for every dollar. So total wagers for every dollar that you want to put, whatever your budget is. The way that I'm playing it, that would cost me $8 to play my exacta and trifecta bets for every dollar that I want to put up. So that's the way I see it. Let me know what you think, how you're seeing the Preakness. Do you think we're going to get the rain? I think the forecast from everything I'm seeing and hearing, there is some rain coming in, but they're expecting that there's still the possibility that it stops by early morning on Saturday and we get a nice dry track. And I'm hoping that's the case. Although we've got some horses here who seem to like the wet stuff. I'm just not sure that that's the impact on the race that some people think it is going to be. I think that those 4 or 5 horses I mentioned there are head and shoulders above the others. That's the way I play it. Again, let me know what you think. Make sure you like the video if you found it interesting or found anything here that you can use. I'll say this, and this is what I always say when it comes to wagers. I'm not telling you what to bet. I'm telling you the way that I'm approaching it, the things that I see. You may think I'm an idiot and that none of it's valid, and that's okay. I'm totally okay with that. You don't have to bet what I'm betting. I would say don't bet what I'm betting, but take a look at my thoughts, see if there's any validity to any of it. Use them as data points as you make your wagers and see how you do. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you're interested in what we're putting out here on the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well. We got a lot of great content coming out. And that should do it for the Preakness. Let's see what happens and see if Mystic Dan maybe can come through. I'm hoping he's in underneath, but it would be interesting if we get to talk about the potential of a third jewel of the Triple Crown at a racetrack that's not the typical one, and all of the asterisk talk that may bring. But again, let me know what you think. And until Saturday, riders up.